All right, welcome to Leadership Series 2.0. My name is Dr. Kashan. This is an initiative of STEM to Innovate, and I'm highly excited with all the guests that have been coming to the Leadership Series. And today we have another very special guest with us, and his name is Gregory Han, and I'm really like to kind of pick his brains on the spiritual leadership aspect, especially because he has been in many different programs and communities, in different interfaith communities. He's been part of, just connecting with different leaders of faiths. And I want to kind of hear from Gregory today, what his perspectives there. Just a bit background on Gregory. He's a Reverend Gregory Han, half Asian, Midwestern raised, Jesuit educated, Harvard trained, and Texas resident. He's also, since moving to Houston, 1988, Greg has worked at the intersection of religion, education, and dialogue. So he has been part of many different programs in those aspects. After a year as a hospital chaplain, Greg served as a Presbyterian congregations for 8 years, and he then taught courses in the study of religion and ethics, as well as English literature for 6 years at the high school level, and also taught for a year in honors college at the University of Houston. Since then, summer 2014, he has served as a director of interfaith relations and education at Interfaith Ministries for Greater Houston, and also he teaches widely across Houston area. He holds degrees from Georgetown University and Harvard Divinity School. So without further ado, Greg, welcome to the Leadership Series.
Dr. Kashan, it's good to see you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Excellent. So let's get started here. I know that this platform is about empowering the community members. It's about connecting with different members with different backgrounds and very diverse backgrounds. And the whole point of the Leadership Series is to build the connections, is to create partnerships, and highlight some wonderful things happening in the community, outside of the community. And we want to be able to get inspired by it, learn from. And especially in times of crisis, we want to be able to lift each other up. And that's the whole point of Leadership Series, is to empower each other up. At the same time, we want to be able to build partnerships, lift each other up. And especially in times of crisis today, we rely upon each other. That's something that we have quickly learned, especially in the pandemic, that we depend upon each other. People need each other. And to be empathetic listener, to be compassionate. So we want to be able to hear Gregory, his point of view on today's crisis. How are you dealing with such crisis? How's your community that you're dealing with? What are the challenges they're facing, and what is your particular message right now?
So with the work with Interfaith Ministries for Greater Houston, we've got this wide range of points of view of taking a look at the needs, and it starts with the needs that we particularly serve, with Interfaith Ministries being Texas's largest Meals on Wheels provider, and also having a robust refugee services resettlement program, the Home of Volunteer Houston, and then the connecting, convening, and educating work we do through interfaith relations and community partnerships. And so, of course, we see directly with our own clients, given that the majority of our Meals on Wheels clients are clients because they're older, food vulnerable, and socially isolated. That automatically puts them in a category in their status where they're going to be COVID vulnerable. And so, and with them being all spread out, and the nature of the pandemic wanting to keep us from being spread out, and really you can't deliver a meal through the television set or through video conference. You need to get out there. We had to pivot quickly and modify and figure out ways to continue to serve people that were in need. and continue to be in need. And so we certainly see that need within the constituencies that we serve regularly. And then through the different conversations, we see the other needs as well. I serve on a subcommittee with the Health Equity Response Task Force with the City of Houston, and of course, and I bet other of your education guests have mentioned issues, particularly with the digital divide. But really, particularly helping people see that there are people that don't have a computer and people that don't have regular internet access. And there are, certain portions of the community that kind of find that amazing, that because of the worlds in which they live. And so a lot of it as well in the pandemic is helping make sure people are connected to worlds that they haven't been connected to, so that they can see and understand concerns that the pandemic has not necessarily caused, but has revealed. Digital divide, food vulnerability. I mean, when you're connecting food access with school and suddenly there's no in-person school, what does that mean? And so our vantage point has also allowed us to see and learn personally, but also to help connect communities to see needs that perhaps they hadn't been aware of before.
Thanks for that response, Greg. I think you covered a lot of great areas today, and I want to build upon our conversation here with those particular points that you mentioned, specifically regarding connecting with the community right now. The folks right now are looking up to the leaders. We live in an uncertain world right now. There's so much uncertainties. People want answers. People look up to the faith leaders. People look up to interfaith leaders. How are we going about ensuring that we are able to provide some hope, provide some answers, some assurances?
So when it comes to leadership, there's one leadership point that I for sure wanted to cover that is sometimes not covered, because we often see leadership as like a technique or different skills. You go to a seminar and you learn these 5 skills to become a great leader. I'm really influenced by a rabbi and a systems theorist named Ed Friedman, who talks about leadership not being a method, but really a presence. And how are you present? And one of my favorite definitions of a leader, or the number one skill a leader needs to have, isn't charisma or isn't managerial expertise, but the ability to manage anxiety. And recognizing that other people's anxieties are going to want to force you to do something. And particularly when a system is disrupted, systems like homeostasis. And people, whether they know it or not, they're going to want to force a system back into homeostasis, which may not be the healthiest place for that system to be. And so leaders need to be more managing their presence in a system than practicing some certain technique. And so my guidance or counsel or whatever it is to faith leaders and leaders in general is to understand the anxiety within a system and understand your role in managing that anxiety. And because out of that anxiety comes that sense of hopelessness or despair. And so I think the word of hope comes out of understanding why that people are sometimes acting out of anxiety, and helping people to manage that, helping to manage the system's anxiety as well. And then particularly for faith leaders, relying and understanding the deep wisdom and the difference between wisdom and intelligence. We have a lot of data available to us. We manage a wonderful Thursday 10 a.m. call with faith leaders that come to listen to people from City of Houston, Harris County Public Health, and an expert from the Texas Medical Center. And it's wonderful data that faith leaders can get as they're figuring out, should we open, should we not? What's the next couple of weeks? What's the next couple of months going to look like? I would also encourage faith leaders to rely on the deep wisdom of our religious traditions and other religious traditions as well. So I would say first, when I'm talking with faith leaders, is understanding that their leadership role within managing the anxiety within their system, often their congregation or faith community.
Thanks for that. Really appreciate that perspective there. I think you covered that the leader's supposed to have an ability to manage an anxiety. And I think that is very critical at this point, especially with individuals that have so much going on in their mental state that nobody knows what's happening. So, what is your key message for those people that just having very much a difficult time managing their own anxiety?
Sure.
Do you have any particular pointers, strategies? How do we go about, what should be the role of the communities right now, local communities?
I think the role of communities is in many ways the role that communities have always played. And I think one thing the pandemic has demonstrated is the power and importance of communities. The greater Houston area is often called one of the most diverse urban areas in America, but it's also a deeply segregated city, sometimes often by race, but also by class. And in many ways, we are a disconnected community. And those communities that I think are resilient, and that's another word that I think is really important to talk about is resilience, are those that have been practicing what communities practice, which is connection and connectivity. Disruption in general, but particularly this disruption, which has actually literally forced us to be apart, is bringing about the issue of being isolated. And we need to remember that communities help people by staying connected. And so I think the issues of anxiety and anxious times, of uncertainty, of job loss, of kids, and I've got a college sophomore and a high school senior, one who just finished his college sophomore year and one who just finished his high school senior year, wondering, is he going back to college? Is he going to college? Is staying connected. And sometimes that's really hard because we tend to want to kind of shrink back because we're feeling vulnerable. And this is where the connectivity of community, of sharing of each other's burdens, and listening to one another is so important. I think we all know how we feel when somebody has really heard us, and listening is another part of leadership that is so important as well. We often mistake listening with waiting our turn in a conversation, and we really have to take the time to listen to one another, particularly as we're all living through a very anxious time. So I would really encourage that time when we're feeling vulnerable because we're anxious and we want to pull back. That's actually the time when we need to move forward and into each other's and be with one another, of course, in socially distanced ways, but that still means we can stay connected.
Absolutely, and I think there's a bit of a misconception about individuals that feel that they should not just now talk to each other anymore, or because of the social distancing terminology. I think it's more about maybe physical distancing rather than social distancing, right?
That's exactly
so we
it.
can still connect virtually, right?
Yeah, we get
and that's highly needed.
It's absolutely necessary right now, and it's even more so at this point of time with a pandemic that is literally saying physically stay away, stay apart from each other because we care about one another, but we have to continue to find ways to stay connected to each other emotionally.
So let's switch gears a little bit,
Yeah.
and I want to hear your perspective on the community members that have lost their jobs. They're just feeling very much in a dilemma right now. A lot of individuals just are wondering how they're going to take care of their rent in the next few months. Well, how are they going to take care of their the just basic bills, their car note. Things like that. What is our message for them? What sort of resources can we find for them? Because we cannot continue to depend on the leadership at the national level, because we see that there's a response time is very slow in able to get what we need. So, and then we depend on the local community leadership as far as the county leadership goes. And I know that they're working towards securing funds, but I think it's just a process that we all have to go through. And not everybody has that sort of, patience to be able to get through it. And some people are just very limited to their need, just limited to their budgets right now.
Yeah. That's a hard one, and I'll try to answer that sort of two ways, kind of the immediate and also the long term. Also recognizing, as I sit here in my in my relative comfort, that I don't know. In some ways, I don't know what I'm talking about. And in some ways, we need to accept and admit our vulnerabilities. And I think that's also the important aspect of leadership, is understanding vulnerabilities, and that we don't know everything, and the notion of our egos getting in the way. I've been so amazed how communities, there's an old saying, politics is local, and it's sort of saying the same thing twice, or redundant, is that communities are local. And I'm always amazed at the resilient, connected communities, how they're helping one another, and they're finding ways, and they're finding resources. And this disruption has brought out, while it has revealed some serious inequities, it has also uncovered and unveiled and revealed incredible resilience within communities. And I would often say, I think, reach out and ask for help, which I think we're not a culture that does that very well. And we find it a sign of weakness, but at this point, I think it's a sign of strength to say, I need help. And because I have found that particularly faith communities are responding that way. I've seen African-American churches, particularly in I think there's one in Fort Bend County that has a food distribution that they have just been so committed to, that I'm so impressed with. A lot of faith communities have resources for helping with rent and rent assistance and things like that as well. I think the other one as well is what's our response to times of disruption. And as an educator, we had to read a variety of books, and one of them is called Mindset by Carol Dweck. And we often talk about the fixed mindset versus the change mindset, and that fixed mindset. And we unwittingly often tell that to our children, is that you're so smart. And so what children will do is they will not do anything that would make them seem not smart, because they see their intelligence as something that's fixed. So we are in some ways inadvertently telling our children not to risk. And sometimes we are with a fixed mindset of, this is what I've done, I can't do anything else, or I can't find my way out. And we're in a point where we need to also understand our change mindset, that we can change. And I think a word that was used on a previous seminar was the idea of being agile, of having an agile mindset as well. And there's an agile mindset concept that Becker College, I saw used, a small liberal arts college over in the eastern part of the United States, talking about being agile in 4 areas: cognitive, social, personal, and also change. And so I think there's long-term, I think there's this disruption of the pandemic is also an opportunity for us to examine our mindsets as well, if we're forced out of a comfortable place, or a place that we're used to, in how we move forward. So of course, want to talk about those immediate needs and asking for help, and seeing that there are so many people that want to help, but also thinking about that long term, about how we see ourselves as fluid, as able to be agile and change in an uncertain future.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I think you really highlighted the very key topic here, which is the being agile at this point, especially when we see that.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky time, and it's a time that's also without easy answers.
Youth, the students right now, they feel like they didn't get to finish the school year on a positive note.
Oh, sorry. Could you just ask the last part of that question one more time? I think your question was about a message to the youth. So I've got.
What is your message to the youth?
I've got a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 16-year-old. So I can definitely, from my own personal experience, understand the uncertainty, and I feel a great deal of optimism. We had an interfaith vigil, a virtual vigil, particularly highlighting and celebrating high school graduates earlier this month, and two graduating high school seniors spoke, and they both spoke really eloquently about the ambiguity of this time. And that's another hard thing as well, that this is a time of the yet and not yet. We're not quite sure. And human beings, we like answers, and we have trouble living in those uncertain, really ambiguous times. And I was really impressed by the message of these two high school seniors who kind of recognized full on the uncertainty of the moment. They weren't overly optimistic. They weren't overly pessimistic. And I think about that as well as I think about the wisdom of religious traditions, particularly out of Buddhist meditation, the focus on just being in the moment. And right now, I think one of the things I would suggest to youth is to be in this moment right now. Wherever they are, and to be fully present to what they're experiencing, the highs and the lows, the uncertainties of where they are and what's going to happen, and not necessarily think always in the future, but to be really present to what the moment itself has to offer, and understanding. And again, I've been so encouraged and impressed by a lot of especially the high school seniors that I've talked to, that they are really embracing the bothness of this time, the excitement, but also the disappointment, the optimism that there's a future, but also the uncertainty of what that future will be. And so I think just encouraging youth to be in the bothness of the moment would be my primary suggestion.
Thank you for that, Greg. Really appreciate it. Any other message you have for the business communities, specifically that parents that have lost the jobs? What is your message for them? And then we can wrap up our session for today.
Sure. Again, I'm not as a pastor, and as particularly thinking about my hospital chaplain experience, and recognizing that I was ministering to people in really dire situations often. I try not to become, I don't want this to sound trite. And so I think my guidance and my counsel is to don't be afraid to rely on others, to mine those, and to be confident that there are inner resources that perhaps you didn't know that you had, and to think about your future not as a fixed one, but as a fluid one, not as one that has been set, but one that you can be agile, and that there can be opportunities. Again, thinking back to people like Ed Friedman that I started this with, a lot of what this is about managing our anxiety and understanding our emotional states first and foremost, before thinking about what the plan is. I think finally, I think this is the other piece is, in times of disruption, we often try to go to old patterns and old answers. This is a time also to be thinking about new questions. And this is what I would say to the students in my classroom. The quality of an answer is directly correlated to the quality of a question. And we may need to ask some new absolutely novel questions and not keep asking the same old questions. To rely to turn to asking new, imaginative, creative, innovative questions, whether it's our family or our jobs or our faith communities or our governments, if we're going to find better answers in an uncertain future.
Excellent perspective there. Thanks, Greg. And I always ask all the members who come to the leadership series, are there particular leaders that you have been inspired by? You can name the few. Maybe you have met those or have not met them. What are your inspirations that you have derived from them?
That's a hard one for me to answer. I tend not to. I don't seem to be a person that really puts people up on pedestals when it comes to it. So all of my major leadership kind of guides and mentors have been the people in my life, ranging from my field education supervisor at Harvard to the first senior pastor that I worked with, to the teachers who are my peers, but they are my mentors. So in many ways, the leaders that I look up to, I really are more mentors than leaders. And I think that's a leadership style that we need to gravitate more towards, not the, as we call it in education, not the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side, not the follow me leader, but the mentor who will guide and nurture, not just a leader, but a human being.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Greg. Really appreciate your time, and we'll definitely stay connected. Really appreciate all the advices and perspectives you provided today.
All right, Dr. Kashan, it's always good to see you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye. All right, so that was Gregory Han. Had a bit of a lag on the network. Really appreciate his patience and continuing to provide really great perspective on spiritual leadership, connecting with the community. He highlighted many specific areas, being resilient at this point, being able to understand how to manage the anxiety. That's critical at this point. Each individual need to be able to have such skills to be able to just pick up on these areas. We need to have such intuition within ourselves that we could definitely identify people that have particular need to what should we do about it right now at this point. Maybe just start connecting with folks. I think that's everybody's role, is to be able to connect, maybe check on our neighbors first. I think that's where our leadership should start there in that aspect. So I would like to end on a very important quote, which is very much focused on our today's conversation. Leadership is based on a spiritual quality, the power to inspire others to follow. And that is something that we need to all reflect upon. How do we continue to inspire each other? How do we continue to lift each other up, in especially today's times that we are in? On that note, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and let's stay connected. Take care. Bye-bye.